Hi, I'm Dr. Stan Steindl. Welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt. Today we're diving into leadership, but not the kind that's all about titles, performance targets, or polished speeches. This is leadership with heart. My guests are Gabriela Jones and Alexandra Thomas, authors of the powerful new book, Compassion-Focused Leadership. In their book, they explore how compassion, which they conceptualize as empathy in action, can transform not only the way that we lead, but the environments that we create. Whether it's understanding the science of our emotional brains, building inclusion and psychological safety, or simply asking the question, how can I be helpful? Gabriela and Alexandra offer a practical, grounded, and inspiring guide to leading with and for compassion. They're trailblazers in Sweden, where their book has already been nominated for HR Book of the Year. And I'm really pleased that they're here today to share their insights with us. And so I bring you Gabriela Jones and Alexandra Thomas. Gabriela Jones and Alexandra Thomas, welcome to Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank you.
Dan. We're so happy to be here.
I'm really keen to talk a little bit about your new book, and I suppose it opens with this fundamental human question: how can I best be helpful, really? And so I suppose I wanted to start there. Why did you choose this as the kind of the heartbeat of your approach to leadership, and sort of what does it mean to each of you personally? Gabriela, I want, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I think that is such an important and beautiful question. It's both for me profoundly political also, and I do see my work as a political one too. And I was born in a time in Uruguay in South America when compassionate leadership was really non-existing. It was a lot of dictatorships going on in the South America, in both Uruguay, where I'm born, but also in Argentina and Chile. So it was a lot of the lack of compassion in the society was part of my upbringing the first years of my life. And we actually had to flee from Uruguay to Chile because of my parents being compassionate architects. Like when I see it back now, that's what they did. They fought for justice, for care, and for fairness in the society. And we had to flee, and we came to Chile. And during this time in Chile, Sweden had a very important person, an ambassador. His name is Harald Edelstam. And he was really keen on seeing persons as persons, not as victims or problems to solve. So he had this compassionate, this both wings of both the nurturing one, saying like validating the pain that people had for fighting for justice, for example, and at the same time this courageous attitude to really make a difference. So even with his body, he really embodied compassion and was a compassion architect. And we usually talked about him at home during my upbringing, about the importance of his way of being, relational and also working for a system shift. So it's both this, the nurturing parts, the individual scene, but also at the same time this cultural and societal way of seeing. So for me, very early in my life, I seen compassionate leadership as something very strong. It's not something soft, and it can really protect life. It can create democracy, and it's very much leading with dignity. So it's really in my DNA, and a view that I've been seeing also our job as psychologists and organizational consultants also to work to influence that kind of attitude that everybody is welcomed.
No, that's amazing, Gabriela. Thank you. I wasn't even quite expecting that answer, but it's very multi-layered and sort of powerfully felt. There's this when one is thrust into a world or a society where there is injustice and there is suffering in a sense, then we learn compassion in a way. That's what can spring from that. And yet what can I, or how can I best be helpful? And that's interesting too, because there might be the nurturing, gentle, tender side to compassion, but there's also the courageous, strong, even righteous anger or sort of fighting or advocating, part of compassion as well. And leadership, well, we'll go on to see as we talk more about it, but in some ways, I suspect leadership may even straddle those two sometimes, the both ends in a way of what compassion might be.
Mm.
Very much so, very much so, yes. And we live in a time of so much cruelty and polarization, and so we really need these compassionate skills, and I think that is our strongest response. Like, it's a very innate response, and it's something that we really need to foster more.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What about you, Alexandra? What is the how can I best be helpful mean for you?
I think being of service and to help others is the very essence of leadership, actually. That should be the main driving force for leaders. To basically facilitate and support the organization, the team, and oneself to develop and grow. And you also ask Stan, what does it mean for us, like as persons and as leaders? I think that for me it's a compass where I try to orient myself towards it every day and try to think, am I contributing right now? Are these thoughts or actions actually helpful? Am I facilitating the team or the organization, or is this egoistic? Or so trying to have that as a compass. And as you know, there are 4 steps within compassionate leadership where we have mindfulness, awareness, understanding, empathy, but also action. And this 4th step, the helpful actions, is what I think makes a compassionate leadership really stand out. To offer help, but also dare to ask for help.
Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's a really great point. And it's kind of how can I best be helpful? And also just a little bit of checking in, am I being helpful, I suppose, is an interesting leadership question. Or just that almost deliberate practice of compassion. Sort of having this compass moving towards helpful action and then reflection to see, like how is that actually going. Alexandra sort of alluded to these different flows, I suppose. And Gabriela, I was going to ask you about, sort of that there's the 3 streams of compassion, I think. Is that sort of how you're phrasing it there? What could you walk us through all of that and how that relates to leadership, especially?
Absolutely. They are so important. And even if you have mentioned them in some way, Alexandra, but talking about these social processes that we need, we are like surrounded by these 3 flows of compassion. And the first one, like compassion for others, is it's such an evolutionary disposition that we have. And maybe the most like clearly seen, like taking care of others is the way we have survived. And that also, when we are working with leaders, we see that flow is it's very used, and
Mm,
usually leaders feel very confident in that field. But then we have other flows, like the flows compassion from others, where you were talking, Alexandra, right now about receiving compassion and showing that it's not a weakness to ask for help. And that's such an important part of being a leader, and also creating more compassion in the organizations, because when you don't receive it, when you don't thank people for giving your help or support, it's also so easy to stop the generosity for others to feel this compassionate high, the helper's high, this energy in our bodies. So that's also like, because being a compassionate architecture and a leader that embodies compassion is also all the time role modeling. How can we be helpful, and how can we model others to receive helps? And then it's the third flow, that is self-compassion, which is really so important. It starts with you, and it's also something that we see that leaders struggle with, because leaders many times are very high achievers, and in that way also quite self-critical and self-blaming. So it's so important also for leaders to foster this self-compassion flow, so you can like be with yourself with kindness when you struggle, when you make failures and you mistakes and so on. So these three flows are really, I mean, they're actually not separate in our brain, but they can be trainable in different ways. And I think that's that's very, at the same time, compassion is innate, we have these flows, but it's also a trainable skill that also closes down when we are under threat. So it's also very important to learn what helps me to be compassionate and would both receive and give compassion towards others and myself. It's so important as leaders to understand these moves in your body and in relation to others, because when you have these three streams flowing, then you are relational, both with yourself and others, which is what leadership is about, keeping like bridging over the connection.
It's really interesting that your first point there was that compassion towards others is one that is actually very familiar for leaders, that leaders do understand that when you've worked with them, they are doing that every day, I suppose, and in a sense that's the servant leadership, I guess, or servant leader that Alexandra was talking about too, that ability to be there and look after those whom you might be leading and serving. But you become a kind of a role model as well, in a way. You need to start to, just open up to the idea of receiving compassion as well, because you want people around you to see that that's good and okay and something that's worth, practicing, and let alone the self-compassion too, that as a leader, you're sort of cultivating and practicing those skills across the three flows for yourself, but also for others to kind of, it's a kind of leadership in itself, isn't it? To role model compassion to those around you.
Yes, and also to role model the beautiful art of receiving.
The beautiful art of receiving.
That you don't have to solve everything alone. You are not alone. You're always in a community if you choose to see it like that, if you act on that.
And usually when we have met leaders that are struggling, with exhaustion and burnout, it's because one of these flows, like compassion for others, is very used. And there is no balance in between these three flows, like receiving compassion from others and giving it the inner stream that is self-compassion. So it's so important also to help leaders include themselves in these streams of compassion flow.
Because Alexandra, your chapter 3 is titled "Compassion Pays Off," I think, or at least that's how I translated it. But what do you mean by that? I guess we're talking about the importance there of compassion across the three flows, but there are personal but also organizational benefits, I think, of compassion.
And there is a quite challenging work life going on out there at the moment. And here we have seen that compassion is not a luxury for organizations that are already thriving or that it goes already well for. It's actually a strategic necessity to make organizations thrive. And in Sweden, stress-related sick leave has increased with 30%. I don't know what it's like in Australia. But of course, this creates a lot of suffering, and also it costs employers billions every year. So if we try to combine the human perspective with economic incentives and put focus, care, and attention in the other end, because economical challenge is time. Leaders usually put focus on we got to meet the goals, we got to keep up with the budget and so on. And of course that's natural and that's a necessity. But if we put attention to the people who form and build the organization, then those other things will come as well. So if the team feels well, they will deliver well. They will deal with stress a lot better. Staff turnover will decrease, and Compassion promotes pro-social behavior that makes us feel connected. We collaborate better. We can create team dynamics that are way more positive. Also promote pro-social behavior so that we want to feel generous. We want to share information, knowledge, help each other. And then we feel connected, more inclined to help each other. And this creates well-being, engagement, motivation, and other benefits. But what we have seen also is better productivity, better innovation, because we can see that compassion is a prerequisite for psychological safety, comes before psychological safety, so that the employees feel safe enough to express ideas, challenge the leader, challenge each other, come up with creative and innovative ideas and so on. So it's the opposite to fear-based organizations. And what Gabriela said before, that, I mean, this goes beyond being kind or nice. It's not just being soft or kind or nice. It's actually, it's quite smart and strategic as well. And it brings about benefits in both ends, both economic and people focused.
Yes, it really brings in a very virtuous cycle, doesn't it, really? You know, that it starts to build a momentum that people start to feel safe. They start to maybe even try out new things more so, and then they build their confidence and their well-being goes up, and gradually, within that compassionate sort of context and organizational context, they're able to actually perform better, and therefore the health of the business financially and otherwise is sort of improving all the times as well. What do you find with leaders? Do you notice that they are kind of easily convinced on some of those ideas, or do they push back a little, or what do you notice?
I think a bit of both, depending on what field you're working in. But I think it's often, at least I meet leaders who they sense that this makes sense. It should be like this. But there might be hinders and boundaries sometimes, like, how will I ever get time to this? Will I just make my team spoiled? Will they ask more from me that I will never be able to give them, and so on. But if we look at the younger generation, they are asking for this kind of leadership more and more. They want purpose, engagement, meaningful workplaces, and so on. So it's not really optional in the long run for leaders to think like, I think I only focus on budget here. I don't care about the people.
That's so true. And the latest Gallup, what do you call it? Gallup
Poll.
sorry, poll?
Gallup poll?
Yeah, poll actually show that employees really want compassion, they want hope, they want trust and stabilization from their leaders. So it's something that, as you were mentioning, Alexandra, is really, really asked for today. And it's not a luxury, as we were talking about. It's a necessity in times of more and more complexity and crises.
Yes, I suppose there are the very natural fears, blocks, and resistances, isn't there, for leaders? They do worry about what will be the implications of this for me, or for my KPIs, or my bottom line, or and they worry too, I suppose, about being taken advantage of, or being used up, but through having, being compassionate. And it all seems, pretty reasonable that leaders might have those thoughts and considerations, and yet there's quite a lot of evidence now that employees generally really prefer and also perform better when that sort of approach is really taken, and trying to help leaders kind of navigate those fears, blocks, and resistances must be an important part of it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's where
absolutely.
self-compassion comes in as well, as Gabriela talked about before. Because of course, if we do only give to others, we will feel drained. It will take a lot of effort. So self-compassion, boundaries need to come in as a
Mm,
complement.
mm. Gabriela, you've taken I think a sort of an evolutionary perspective with all of this in the book, and you sort of explore our old brain and new brain sort of stuff, and trying to use that evolutionary take to help us understand, I guess, about leadership and especially some of the pressures that can be there and so on. I mean, how do you approach all of this from that evolutionary perspective?
Well, that is really important, and it's also like a bridging over what we were talking about before, that our human brains are shaped by evolution to keep us safe. And we have both this old brain capacity of survival mode, the threat and the drive system, but also these newer parts like that are like planning, where empathy and self-awareness are like in our system. And we need to balance these two systems to be able to also to lead with an open heart. And we see a lot of examples now when stress is increasing in organizations also, that we can easily levitate to this rapid threat detection and immediate threat responses like fight, flees, and freeze. And so, I mean, you can see that leaders, snap colleagues or withdraw or become very over controlling, and even when you don't have time to listen and understand. So we have to work. It's really important as a leader to know like what triggers my old brain, my survival mode, to be able to be the best leaders I can be, like we can be. And the capacity to self-regulate and to make long-term consequences and take in other person's perspectives, that is in our newer brain. So this is so important also to be able to train skills, to be able to self-regulate and to keep alignment with our values, because that is actually what this is about. Like, how can we all the time be present as leaders that want to create cultures of care? And cultures of care demands that we have both the knowledge, but also work with the new brain's ability to regulate.
Mm.
So kind of
Yeah.
yeah, so that so that we're present as leaders
Mm. Mm.
in the best way.
Because leaders are humans too, I suppose, is you could say,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
le-
Yeah,
leaders have
absolutely.
tricky brains, and yeah, as you say, these sort of
Yeah,
old brain
absolutely.
functions will kind of activate here and there, and suddenly will, as a leader, might be in survival mode, and there might be
Absolutely.
various thoughts and feelings, or kind of expression of feelings, and those old brain motives that kick in, and
Yeah. And
sometimes
we
that can.
know,
Oh, sorry.
no, sorry. I got too eager. Just go on.
I was just going to sort of finish with the way that sometimes the new brain sort of exaggerates that survival mode as well, and so we might have
Exactly.
these thoughts of catastrophizing or mind reading, or the worry and the rumination that kicks in, and that's kind of new brain stuff that just maintains that old brain survival instinct, and how do we shift into the new brain functions, which are more about perspective taking and the rest of the stuff. But you were going to say.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry for interrupting you, but because I really think that one of the most important things about leadership is like keeping relation. And what happens when we come back to the survival mode is that we lose connection, really. So one way also, like, people are always looking for the leader, the leader always, like, the mood of the leader will always be contagious for other people in the room. And in that way, you're always modeling safety or non-safety, like. And you have, well, we think that as a leader, you have a responsibility to work with yourself to create spaces where people can feel safe and not so much in the fear response. So that's so important to stay grounded. I mean, storms will come, and you have to have this ability to not be so easily hijacked by the old system.
Mm.
Mm.
Alexandra, you bring in to the book the three emotion regulation systems, which a lot of people who watch this channel or listen to this podcast are kind of somewhat familiar with Paul Gilbert's model, the the threat system, the drive system, and the soothing system. But how do these systems kind of play out in leadership, or would there be kind of even an example really of where you can start to see those three systems at play?
I think we live in and Paul Gilbert talks about this as well, that we live in a time that is more interested in high demands and competition than collaboration. And we have talked about survival mode. So the threat system puts us, we pretty much aim to survive when we are here. We are not inclined to compassion when we are in survival mode or the threat system, but more focused on competition, performance, how can I contribute, fear and stress. And we can also, I mean, if we think about a leader perspective, the leader can struggle to see alternatives, is not inclined to ask for help, is not offering help either, can also become isolated, defensive, exhausted, withdrawal behavior, disconnected from others. And of course, it's difficult for an employee to come to such a leader and ask, could you look into this? I'm not sure about my role. So here we get teams who work a lot in silos and just try to survive in the own role. So when compassion is missing in the leadership, we have both seen that people's more harsh traits can come to the forefront. It can be power struggles, and yeah, not collaboration at all, and negative competition, lack of care. So if we go to the second system, the drive system, here we have dopamine being released, and we can feel engaged and enthusiastic. We want to do more, earn more, be more, achieve more. And we want to achieve social status, and of course can start to compete with each other. So the drive system feels very rewarding. And here it's important for a leader to be observant whether you are spending too much time here, because you can really, it can be contagious, so that other team members start to see, okay, at this workplace, we seem to compete, and it's important to work long hours, and it's important to achieve a lot. So of course it brings a lot of satisfaction to reach goals, and it's rewarding to be here. But if you start skipping lunch breaks, or you work in front of or you eat in front of the computer, or so on, then you need to be observant. This is almost like a drug, and that it feels so good to be here, and yeah, you need to be observant of that. So the soothing system, here you can start to balance, and compassion is also great to balance the three systems. Here, oxytocin is being released, and the soothing system is essential to create supportive environments, safety. Team workers can feel appreciated and cared for in a deep way. And this strengthens social bonds, so that we want to stay in the team, we want to stay at the workplace. And you can train these systems, which we will talk about a bit later. The soothing system can be trained so that you can become better. And this is not about leaders sitting at the office resting, but it's more that you can shift so that your breathing becomes calmer, you affect your co-workers so that the team becomes more calm, and you become more receptive to feedback. You can experiment a lot more, and bring in psychological safety into the workspace.
Mm, mm. Yeah. The threat system can sort of be both activating and inhibiting, can't it? Sometimes it's activating in that people sort of, express it through anger maybe, or sort of other behaviors, but sometimes it can be very inhibiting, and we sort of maybe shut down, or we avoid, or those sorts of things. And the drive system is also very activating, and as you say, can sometimes feel good, but it's sort of it's a double-edged sword as well. You know, it can be exhausting too, I suppose. And I was quite interested in how you really started to be you were alluding there, I think, to social mentalities and in particular the social rank theory, the way that we're really kind of trying to establish where we are in the hierarchy, I suppose, when it's this threat and drive piece, and it's tricky, we don't want to be pushed down the rank, or that sort of
No,
thing, and
not at
so
all.
it's the competitive piece comes in, but it mixes in with a bit of threat and social rank and so on. Any more thoughts on those bits?
Talking about power dynamics at workplace is not something that we do very much, but the awareness of power dynamics is so important because as leaders, talking about inclusion, for example, as leaders, we tend to maybe find more information with some people in our organizations, and we have to be aware of how these power structures, the hierarchies that are at the workplace, how they actually influence how we lead. And the people around us and how they see us. And so I think that's such an important part of it. And also, when you were talking about, Alexandra, when you were talking about how this manifests in daily life, like the threat system, in the beginning, it can be like for leaders also to be more aggressive, maybe shouting out, but in the end, when you're in the burnout spectrum, then withdrawal, what you were talking about, Stan, is so common, when you don't have so much energy left. And so, yeah.
Here it comes in a lot about role modeling in the leadership. So you are a leader who choose to take a walk and talk, or go for a walk during lunch breaks, and show that it's okay to reflect even if it's working hours, or because it's working hours, then other people will feel more comfortable to start to copy that and see that, okay, we don't have to be in the drive system all the time. It's not an ongoing threat 8 hours a day. Maybe we can have a proper lunch break. Maybe we can go for walk and talks and have meetings in a different way, and so on. So those behaviors will spread for sure. And also, as a leader, being observant of, instead of checking that last evening email, or send that to your team, and maybe you should just call a friend instead, or go for a walk in the forest, and then come back the next morning and be more calm and strategic in the way you explain something or formulate an email.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yes, it's helping leaders to have that mind awareness, noticing their own minds and noticing the way that they might have these different systems activated,
Yeah.
and certainly and eventually having the skills, I guess, to activate the soothing system such that there is that calmness and groundedness and sort of stability which they can feel within themselves, but it spreads. I think you said, it sort of spreads to the team. Actually, Gabriella, you have a section of the book about leading with compassion, which I suppose is what Alexandra was just sort of starting to talk about. But there's a chapter on non-judgment. So,
Yeah,
like
that's so important.
I always find that really a curious one, because it's kind of it's difficult in a way, but and yet essential. So, how can leaders cultivate something of a non-judgmental stance, especially when dealing with mistakes or conflicts amongst the team or difficult emotions that might arise with people?
Yeah, it's such a vital quality, and I agree with you. I think we both do that. It's such a difficult one too.
Mm,
And it's interesting, I think, that when you look at old practices, like old Buddhist practices that are more than 2,000 years long, like you find practices about non-judgment in the core of the practices, and that's because this is so easy for us, and we do judge, we do,
yes.
and as we were talking about before, like leaders that are high achievers, and you can also judge yourself. It's not only that you judge others, it's like sometimes as leaders, we are so hard towards ourselves. So that is so important also. But as a leader, and as we were talking about this, like keeping this leadership is relation. And as soon as you start to judge or blame other ones, or yourself, you create a separation. You create me and you, and you lose this we part of the connection. So that's why it's so important also to be aware what kind of things do create this judgment or blaming. And one way to train that is by training mindfulness, for example, being aware what happens. Because I would say that when you start to judge, it is the threat system that is activated. You feel it in your body as a threat, it's a pain. Even if you are like showing it towards others or yourself, it's a threat response in your body. So it's so important to practice, for example, mindfulness, to be aware of what happens in your body when you feel pain. Is it a contraction in your body? So in one way, it's to work with judgment and becoming more non-judgmental is actually befriending your body, becoming more okay with what's happening, but also adding, like Christine Neff's concept of common humanity, that we're all the same, we're not alone, everybody does this, everybody judges themselves and others. This is what it is to be human. And at the same time, then adding this compassionate, the self-compassionate part, that sometimes we need to forgive ourselves for being so hard towards others and towards ourselves. So I think the one way to practice this is very much by like the self-compassion part, like mindfulness, common humanity training, and the self-kindness part. And I think the common humanity part is the one that is really difficult for many leaders to include themselves in the stream of being just humans, that everybody is struggling with this. We are not alone in this, yeah,
Mm.
in
Mm.
humans. Mhm.
What would you say to a leader about, for example, there's a staff member, say, who has made a mistake and who has perhaps caused difficulties there in the workplace or with a client or something like that, and they are wanting to sort of juggle the non-judgment and being really, kind of tapping into common humanity and kind of acceptance, I suppose, of the other person, and people make mistakes, and at the same time wanting to provide some sort of feedback. I guess maybe I'm answering my own question. It's sort of the helpful feedback in a way, or that sort of thing. But what would you sort of say to a leader who's grappling with those two ends of the job?
I think it's so important, and sometimes we actually I think the practice of like just like me is such a beautiful practice to have as a leader, to remember that the other person is just a person too that is struggling in this moment, and that this moment is difficult, and here the self-compassion break that you can do just in some seconds is also such a helpful way. This is a moment of suffering. I maybe don't understand the other person, but I really want to understand the other person. So that could be actually to talk about that. As a manager, I don't see everything. Help me to notice what you feel or what you see from your perspective. So open up with questions that are inclusive, to help the other person feel seen. And I think we have to start there with this generous interpretation and lead with dignity. What is it that
Mm,
I'm not seeing? Can you help me
mm,
out? Um,
mm.
I think it's also important to give feedback on the actual specific task or the specific behavior, so that the employee doesn't feel like it's me as a person. I'm wrong. No, it went wrong. Something didn't go according to plan. It's not you as a human being.
Mm. Yeah, so was it generous interpretation? Is that what you said, Gabriella?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Starting with a generous interpretation, sort of listening well, isn't it? Like being able to listen well and kind of have sort of invite the person to really share their perspective or their experience of things, and then if there is to be feedback, keeping it fairly behavioral or task specific, or trying to sort of focus it in on the feedback itself in a non-blaming, non-shaming kind of way, but in a way it is compassionate leadership to be able to offer feedback, because what's the alternative? I guess the alternative is they don't get any feedback, and that's not helpful really for them either.
Absolutely not. I mean, we are in a learning every job is a learning possibility, and has to be if you want to survive as a company also. So it's really important to provide that. Yeah, absolutely.
Alexandra, you devote a whole chapter to self-compassion, which I think is perhaps in the olden days, might not be something that we would have associated with leadership, but it does seem to be becoming particularly important. How might leaders begin to just sort of move into that space and start to develop,
Yeah.
self-compassion?
Compassion-focused leadership is very close connected to self-leadership, and here self-compassion is an important part within the self-leadership practice. Because if we are aware of and can have self-compassion with that, we are neither perfect as leaders nor people or human beings. We can become more consciously aware as leaders, and also to know what am I triggering as a leader here? Am I triggering stress and competition, or am I triggering cooperation, that we dare to share mistakes and failures? To just know that you are on an ongoing project is quite self-compassionate as well, that we are not finished. We can allow imperfection in ourselves, and we can allow imperfection in others as well, and build resilience in that. Self-compassion gives us an increased capacity to stay in challenging situations. And it makes us more likely to forgive both ourselves but also others, like this employee who has committed a mistake. Then if I tend to be self-compassionate and tend to forgive myself, then of course it's easier for me to put myself into the other person's shoes and forgive that person and start from the beginning again. And we talked about these 3 flows before. Practicing self-compassion can also open up, so it becomes easier for me as a leader to receive and to give compassion. But for others, it's the other way around. It's tricky as a leader to practice self-compassion. So many leaders need to start in the other end and give, but then also to just know that there are 3 flows is helpful. And also, if you push your boundaries too much, and you are constantly working on your vacation and so on, maybe if you know that there is a concept called self-compassion and dig into that, you can start to fill that hole a little bit, feel that emptiness, and ask yourself, what's important to me? What do I need now to refocus? Why do I feel so triggered? And try to be kind to yourself in that process.
I liked how you mentioned leadership and self-leadership and sort of leadership compassion and self-compassion. And then I suddenly thought to myself, in a funny sort of a way, leadership flows in 3 directions as well, I suppose. We might lead others, we might be led in a sense, and look up to someone who might offer us leadership, and then we have the self-leadership. Does that make any sense to think of those similar 3 flows?
Okay. That we are in a system all the time, and sometimes we are swapping roles. So like middle managers, sometimes you are led by someone, you have to communicate decisions to your own team, you have the board, you have the part owners, or whatever. You're playing all those different roles and have to have compassion with different perspectives and different hats that you put on.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, Gabriela, I guess that brings us to, I mean, these are often big systems of lots of diverse peoples, different people that we're working with and leading and trying to create that sense of inclusion and for all, I suppose, who, compassionate leadership must involve really creating spaces where people feel they belong, feel safe. What are what are the core practices there that might support a sense of inclusion?
Yeah, I think that's such an important question also, because as leaders, we always have blind spots, as we were talking about before, it's so important for us to feel that if we work with inclusion, people will feel that they belong. And we were naming before this, as a leader, to create inclusion is also to name, like the power awareness that we were talking about before, and also naming that everybody matters, like, so that you, when you were asking how can you practice this, yes, you can practice this by actually creating this feeling or this sense that everybody you're talking with in this moment are the most important person in the room. You matter. The signal is always like, you matter, you are important, what you bring up is really it's really important for me to hear as a leader. So inclusion is very much this signaling that everybody's welcomed in this community, as they are, in one way. And that's one part of the book that we have a lot of exercises around this. But it's very much like we were talking about, it's very much noticing, being present with what's happened, and giving people the the sense that they are really important here. And that is also something that you can train,
Mm.
of course.
Yes, there's sort of genuineness, there's curiosity, there's respect, validation. You know, these kind of, I guess they're all quite big words, but they can be sort of focused down to certain behaviors, certain skills that leaders might bring to create that sense of safeness and belonging.
But it could be very concrete. You can have like a week where you decide like to check out, like, who do I talk to during my day? How do I listen to everybody in the room? Do I listen to some people? Do I interrupt other people? Do I just take in information from some people? So you could actually map, what kind of relations do you have during your week at your workplace, and see, do I need to like open up for other voices in this place? And as soon as you start to do that you start, but because that's a compassionate act, so that all people and all voices are heard in an organization. And that's actually because we have all these blind spots. We used to, listen to some people more, and sometimes we are very unconscious about that. So that's creating more consciousness is like the awareness of being a good leader is so important. What
Mm,
do I don't see? And how can
mm,
I open up for seeing more?
mm,
So that I also can prepare for taking care of pain and suffering in this organization if that is needed.
mm. That's such a
Mm.
great practical example, just doing a little self-audit on,
Yeah.
how do I go in my larger meetings? Who am I finding myself listening to more or less, or giving more or less attention to? Is there a way that I can move the attention about and have others share their voices as well? It's a really lovely way to lead with compassion. Alexandra, the book goes on to talk about leading for compassion, and so yeah, this sort of zooms out a little bit. In fact, Gabriela said at the start, compassionate architecture, I think, and this sort of social architecture for compassion. What does that really look like, I guess, in practice?
Yeah, here we are zooming into the organizational landscape, and the
Mm,
Center for Compassionate Leadership speaks about the leading with and leading for compassion, which we have also described in our book. And by leading for compassion, you design this architecture where you look into the organization's, you promote roles, a culture for compassion, a structure for it, routines, so that you have it in meetings, from everyday meetings to strategic communication, in recruitment. So how do we welcome new employees, for example? And if compassion is integrated and spread in the whole organization, it's a lot better than that this just stops at one skilled leader who tries to solve the architecture on their own. That's quite common, actually, that we meet leaders that try to uh, carry the whole compassion architecture on their shoulders. But if you can be a role model for this and spread it so that the team members also start to help and see each other, it's a lot better. And then it's built into the culture. And also, to just notice all the time. I mean, Gabriella, you had a really, really good example, but try to go to the roots of the problems instead of just healing the symptoms, but rather trying to challenge dysfunctional structures, such as we have meetings all the time. So there is no chance that anyone can be prepared for meeting number 4. We have only gone in the corridor to meetings after meetings after meeting. So look into that structure and think, does it have to be like this, or can it be working, functioning in another way? If we see a colleague who is suffering or who feels very stressed, how do we meet that colleague? How do I as a leader talk to that person? And how can you as a colleague embrace that there is too much workload? Can we redistribute? Can we look over each other's roles here? And also thinking that it doesn't have to be like the receptionist who is a natural compassion architect. Everyone can be an architect. Everyone can be a role model for helpfulness and compassion. So make it spread it.
There can be compassion champions or something, can't there, sometimes,
Yeah.
where people are particularly keen on it and want to spread the word and that sort of thing. And that's probably very useful and they can be a part of what begins this more broader architecture of compassion. But on the other hand, we want to then move towards others also coming in and starting to, because it takes effort, it takes energy, it probably takes courage, to bring compassion into an organizational structure like that. But it can be across the organization. Perhaps the receptionist has a really important role. So do the team members, the leaders are doing their bit. It kind of it goes across the organization. And I suppose, Gabriella, it really creates that psychological safety, I suppose, is,
Yeah,
and I think it
absolutely.
was Alexandra who said earlier that compassion in a way comes first and then comes the psychological safety in a sense. It sort of can grow out of that. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
how does compassion bring that alive?
I think that if we can trust that people will come to our help when we're really needing it, that creates a psychological safety. So it's so important to model compassion in like as a leader, for example, as we are talking about leadership today, but even self leadership, that everybody can have this preposition or work towards this. I think it's so important to show that we are vulnerable, that we're just humans, that we fail, that we make mistakes, and as a leader also show that is okay. That is part of being like the common humanity part that we were talking about before, and also modeling that. We are such a social animals, so we look at each other all the time. So now we were talking about before, a leader's nervous system and what they show is okay, like to be imperfect, to be just, to make mistakes, is such a beautiful and important way to lead, and also very contagious in that way too. And we know that when people feel safe in organizations, when people feel safe with the leaders and with other people around, we become more productive, innovative, and we, yeah, creativity flows and so on. So it's such an important way. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, it's popped to mind the Maya Angelou quote that I love, which is that one about people don't really remember what you tell them, or even necessarily what you do. They remember how you made them feel, and I suppose that's what is created here with the compassionate leadership, spreading to a compassionate organization, creating a feeling of psychological safety where people can then, venture out into their drive system a little bit, but from a calm, grounded, safe place.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important to create this. We are wired to belong. We want to belong in organizations, and that's so when leaders model this, you feel also that they are human, and it's so much more easy to engage when people are humans around you. And
Mm.
yeah, yeah. And also that exclusion actually activates the brain regions that are connected with pain also. So we want to belong. It's so important.
Yeah.
We need
Yeah.
not only want, we need to belong.
Yes, exclusion is very threat system activating. Belonging is very soothing affiliative system activating, and then we can feel calm and grounded to go out and explore the world. Alexandra, the book has quite a few exercises, I think, through it, but you sort of talk about daily exercises, small actions, big impact kind of thing. What would be a favorite practice? Would you like a favorite daily practice that you
Yeah,
might
we
recommend?
state in the book that compassion is a verb and it can become a part of our daily interactions, practices, but also intentions, motivations, and choices. And I think pause and reflection is really, really good to put the leader in the soothing system, but also so that we can stand firm, clear, and compassionate when it comes to values, decisions, relationships. It's that inner compass that I began to talk about. Um, and also because reflection reduces our stress levels and creates an inner stability. And as we said before, we are so contagious as leaders. Our whole nervous system will have effect on the team. So if I can pause and reflect and show people that that's okay to do, that's very beneficial. Um, Not many leaders do this, however. We meet a lot of leaders who say that they reflect, and maybe they do. But reflection can be so much. It can also be in a structured way where you have a 30-day challenge, for example, where you reflect on your learning strategies, goals. And there are many practices that increases compassion as well when it comes to reflection. And I think it's also good to combine it with mindful breathing, so that you are not just whoa, having 30 seconds to reflect, that didn't go well, but try to consciously calm down the system and then think like, okay, I didn't reply that well to my colleague. I need to restart, do this from the beginning. Can I ask for forgiveness or whatever it may be? So you become more present and more inclined to act with compassion when you use pause and reflection.
I get the sense that those four steps that you mentioned right at the start are in an exercise like that. Just remind us what those four were.
Yes, so it's mindful awareness. So, for example, if I sit in a meeting and I feel like it becomes snappy between me and a colleague, then I'm mindfully aware of that. And I don't automatically go into the threat system and think, oh, you're so stupid. You're always competing, or you are this and you are that. But more like, be aware of what's going on and try to understand why without blaming. Maybe you are acting in a competitive way that triggers something in that other person. Maybe it's something in the functions or in the roles that are not clear. Maybe you have gone into your colleague's territory without asking, or I mean, just be open for that it could be you as well. And try to understand what you don't understand in the interaction. Have empathy, third step, with yourself and with the other person, that this is a tricky situation. If it's awkward, it's like it's not going so well at the moment. Have empathy with that, and then try to act to alleviate this suffering or a challenging situation, whether that is choosing to talk after the meeting. When I spoke about this region being an ambassador for this and this topic, I sense that it didn't land so well. Did I interpret that in the right way? What do you think? So invite the other person, be inclusive, so it doesn't just stop with empathy, where you feel like, oh, this is tough, and this is tough for you, and it's just silence. So go to that fourth last step and try to do something about it.
Yeah, so I can imagine that a lot of leaders might begin by practicing that sort of slightly later in time. You know, they step out of that meeting, they get back to their office, and then they think, I'll just try to work through those steps now. And then gradually they bring it closer and closer to the actual moment itself. And they're able to do it on the fly or, you know, sort of practice and daily practice, I imagine, really would help people to embody all of that.
Definitely. And here we really have the courageous compassion. And if we have the nurturing compassion, this is courageous to dare to believe in what you sense, to work. And the more you pause and reflect, the more you come in contact with your intuition as well. So you know that I'm not just making this up. This doesn't feel well. So I choose to take it.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think that one other very important step, or not step, maybe knowledge is a wisdom part, because it's
Mm.
so important to know that we have this tricky brain. This will happen all the time. It's not like you're, it's like going to the gym. You have to like train all the time because these situations will happen. We get triggered and we trigger others also. So, yeah.
Mm. So I'll let you go in a moment. Thank you very much for spending lots of lovely time with me discussing all of this. But I suppose I was going to finish to sort of see what would be like if there was one message or one takeaway from your book. What do you most hope it would be? I guess perhaps Alexandra first.
Um, that compassion is an intention and motivation that takes, it doesn't have to take so much time. It can really occur simultaneously with other tasks. So if I choose, for example, to smile when I welcome everybody to the meeting, or I have a check-in question that is not only about financial goals, but I also ask how everyone is doing. Maybe that takes 30, 40 seconds, but it really, it has a great effect. So if you think how much compassion actually gives, and yeah, it takes remarkably little time to do
Mm.
it.
Yes, it's a motivation and an intention, but it sort of punches above its weight. Although I'm not sure that that's quite the right saying to talk about compassion. But yes, it can really
Mm.
deliver. Gabriella, what about you? What would be
Yeah,
one
I
takeaway?
would love to. Yeah, I would love to say that compassion is really a regenerative force. It really gives more than it takes. And it's such a source of energy, you know, and courage and connection. And it's so important because pain is always there. It's maybe not you that has pain right now in the moment, but there is in the room usually someone maybe next to you, and it's so important also to be open for that. For compassion is always in the room also, if we want
Mm,
that. And compassion doesn't erase pain, but not necessarily. It can do that, but it can transform it, and that's so important how we carry it together, I think. And that aspect is so changes everything.
mm.
Uh, that's so important. So yeah, we have a part in the book where we even write compassion is a verb, and that's Thich Nhat Hanh's words. But it's really like, yeah, compassion is something you choose to do. It's the motivation and an intentional part. So you can do it every time, moment by moment, day by day, you know. You can always start. There's always a possibility to be a compassionate leader.
Mm. Well, I really appreciate that. I think that's a beautiful place to finish. So, Gabriella Jones and Alexandra Thomas, thank you very much for speaking with me on
Mm.
Compassion in a T-shirt.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Stan. Such a good way to start the morning. Uh, Thank you. The Swedish
Excellent.
morning.
Yes, yes. Well, for me, it's time for dinner. So there you go.
Yeah.